everyone. Welcome to Building Healthy, Strong Communities, Session 1, Lessons on Community Collaboration, Learning, and Engagement. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. If you wish to receive CEs for today's webinar, you will need to stay for the duration of the event and respond to all the poll questions you see pop up throughout the presentation. You will see the first one now. If you do not see the poll pop up, please place your response to the question in the chat. There will be time for Q&A throughout today's presentation. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. We encourage participation in the chat throughout today's presentation. I am now going to turn it over to Beth Angel, Dean of the School of Social Work, to welcome you to this year's Building Healthy, Strong Communities virtual conference.
Thank you, Madison. Good morning, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the 2025 Building Healthy, Strong Communities Conference. I'm Beth Angel, the Dean of the School of Social Work, and I'm so pleased to welcome you all. Nothing gives me more pleasure, especially on a very rainy day like we're having here in Ann Arbor, of being in a virtual room together with a lot of social workers. So I'm so excited to be with you all. Over the next 2 days, we have an amazing lineup of presenters who will discuss a wide range of topics, including advances in mental health care accessibility, utilizing generative AI in social work practice, understanding community culture, building connection through dialogue, and this session, which will be an insightful discussion about community collaboration. I'm confident that you will find each session you attend to be informative and applicable to your work. Each year, the Professional Development Committee of the School of Social Work Alumni Board comes together to plan a conference that explores topics that are relevant to the time and to social work practice, and that is definitely the case in this year's program. So I'd like to give a very big thanks to this year's committee for their hard work in planning this year's conference. And speaking of which, I would now like to introduce Ed Ignatios, a member of the Professional Development Committee, who will be introducing today's presenter. Again, welcome everyone and enjoy this wonderful day.
Thank you, Dean. My name is Ed Ignatius, and I have the role today of introducing.
Can you screen, Charles, and let's see if I can see your screen.
Sure.
Okay.
And I have the role of introducing our moderator for the panel, Dr. Trina Shanks. Are we okay?
You're good.
Well, yeah, okay, saw that.
Madison and Charles, we can hear you.
I can't see what you're seeing. Okay, let's see here.
Go on, Ed, you're good.
All right. So Dr. Trina Shanks is the director of the School of Social Work Community Engagement, the Harold R. Johnson Collegiate Professor of Social Work, and a faculty associate of the Survey Research Center at the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research. Her research interests include the impact of poverty and wealth on child well-being, asset building policy and practice across the life cycle, and community and economic development. Since 2018, she has overseen the school's strategic goal of community engagement and leads the evolving Engage team that promotes, coordinates, and facilitates greater impact in community and social justice. As a faculty affiliated with the Technical Assistance Center funded by the Skillman Foundation over a 10-year period, Trina Shanks has actively engaged in the 6 Detroit communities as
yes.
part of the Good Neighborhoods program.
Let's see if that
Okay.
And she also has conducted multiple evaluations of Detroit's summer youth employment program, Grow Detroit's Young Talent. Dr. Shanks, thank you so much for joining us today to lead this discussion.
Thank you so much, Ed. I appreciate being introduced by you because you're one of the ones of my first community collaborations. And so I'm excited to be a part of this panel. I'm excited for the 3 alumni who will be a part. And I'm going to try to share my screen to make sure you guys can see my slideshow. Hopefully you guys can all see that. Okay, Good. So I will tell you what we're going to do today. Let's see. Okay, so I'll make a few opening remarks. Then we're going to have an
Okay, let's
amazing
see.
panel
I'm
conversation
unable to
with
see it.
Amy Good,
Okay.
Carol Goss, and
Let's do
Charles
first select
Tomasulo,
the
who are
microphone. Let's do Sana
alumni
Thuptam.
of the
Okay,
school.
microphone.
And we'll keep on going here. So I'd like to start. I always start when I teach with definitions. So there's all sorts of definitions of community collaboration. This one came from a European journal which talked about all social scientists. So social work, political science, sociology, anthropology. I thought it was a really good start. So community collaborations is when people form social relationships. So it's not just an idea, people actually work together and in some form of collective action, striving towards socio-political or structural transformation. So that's kind of the base point of what community collaboration is or could be. But I think it's important to know that there's lots of different ways to approach collective action. So sometimes it can be bottom up. So people have a common need and they creatively find ways to solve it. So it could be there's a vacant lot that has lots of grass and a couple families decide that they're just going to take turns mowing the grass. Or maybe there's been some problems at lunchtime at school and the teachers are busy and no one's there. So the PTA says we'll volunteer to come and kind of monitor the lunchroom to make sure that the kids are in trouble. So it's a common need and people kind of creatively figure out how to solve their own needs. And then a little level up from that is community action. So citizens actually collaborate and organize to either share knowledge or to have some sort of community life for citizenship. So maybe there'll be an annual cleanup of trash, or maybe there'll be some sort of parade, or maybe, you know, if every time there's rain or when the power goes out or there's flooding, and we want to go talk to our council person, make sure we could do something about that. Why does that happen? So that's kind of community action. And then you can have governance through cooperation, partnership, collaboration. So this is kind of a little more official. You have nonprofit organizations decide they're going to work together to support a common agenda. Then you might also have grassroots initiatives that do the same thing. So people come together, maybe not formal or not all formal organizations, but they realize that they want to do something and they create networks, maybe like a Black Lives Matter. So maybe after there are a series of police violence, they say, you know what, next time this is going to happen, we're going to come together and we're going to report this and we're going to show that this is the issue. We're going to show that we want to work together to reduce this harm. Then you have things like neighborhood initiatives. So that may be where a CDC, a community development corporation, or some sort of embedded initiative kind of says, we're going to try to bring political attention to an issue. We're going to meet the basic needs of a locality. And then going up from there, you might have a social movement. So that's where people that have across a range of identities might decide that they're going to take on some big human concern, like, you know, civil rights or LGBTQ rights or whatever it is. They're going to say, we're going to work together to try to make this bigger social change. And then you have things like solidarity-based movements or social economies, where you actually are trying to change economic capital. You're trying to lead to some sort of economic transformation. It could be a cooperative. It could be something like a Kalamazoo Promise or Detroit Promise, where everyone who lives in a city and graduates from a local high school gets a scholarship, but you're actually trying to change the economy in formal ways. So again, going from more micro, just individuals being creative, to more formal, where there's fundraising and salaries and things like that. But this is different approaches to collective action. And with that, we'll have a poll question to see if you're paying attention. What are some potential aspects of community collaboration? They build upon social relationships. They incorporate some sort of collective action. They strive to achieve social structural transformation, or D, all of the above. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Looks like people are paying attention. That's good. Okay, I'll end this poll and go to, oh wait, I guess, does everybody have to do it? I think everybody's done it. Okay. So we'll go to the next one. I don't know if I share results. Stop sharing. Okay. Poll question number 2. What are some examples of collective action? Just starting your own personal business, maybe a neighborhood initiative, social economies, or B and C. Again, people are paying attention. I like that. looks like everybody has gone, or maybe not. Okay. Okay, keep on going. And so a special kind of community collaboration is when a school of social work or a university goes into a community collaboration or research collaboration. And it's a little different because even though you're still having a social relationship, even though you're having some sort of collective action, even though you're trying to do change, the partners are a little different. So one, there's an article I put forth this kind of 4 best practices, if you will. So this idea of adopting a technology exchange perspective. So both the community and the university or the school of social work have things to contribute, and realizing they may both bring different things, but they can work together to make that happen. And then you also have to realize that it's not going to happen overnight, probably not even a week or a month or a year, but you have to take a long perspective if you actually want to have significant change. So realizing that it's not a quick jump in and jump out, but hopefully you're having a partnership that you plan to keep engaging in for a long period of time, and realizing it may take time to make these things happen. The other thing is to know your partner. So you want to know why the community partners are participating, and also why the university is participating. What are their missions? What are their ways of working? Just to give one very specific example from the Good Neighbors Initiative, at one point, the Skillman Foundation put forth, these are all of the people we fund. And it said, Regents of the University of Michigan, like $2 million. And they all looked it up. They're giving you guys $2 million? But no individual faculty can get money, right? It has to go through the Regents of the University of Michigan. So our community, a technical assistance center got a little bit of that. The School of Public Health got some of that. People who were doing data analysis got some of that. They had lots of people, but it looked like just one big entity. So if you didn't understand how universities worked, it looked like just one group got this big chunk of money, right? Also knowing something maybe about the boards of your community-based organizations, or knowing how long people have been engaged and what their priorities are. If you know your partners, then you can work together better over time. And even though this is kind of a nuts and bolts kind of thing, you also want to be clear about whatever financial arrangement's going to make. So whether it's a contract, an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, or budgets, you want to make sure everybody's clear what's happening, so there's not confusion or disagreements later on. So these are some kind of best practices, particularly as you're looking at School of Social Work and a community research collaboration, or a university community collaboration. So third poll question, I just said this. So what are important things to consider when starting a university community collaborative? So prepare to work together over an extended period of time and be clear of financial arrangements. Allow the community residents to make all decisions, or defer to the university faculty and their expertise. Again, people are paying attention. Awesome. Giving us a few more seconds to make sure everybody takes the poll. All right. Just as a, touch base, probably you should never always defer to university or always defer to the community. You should be working together over time. So it looks like most people got that one. Okay. And so I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk about examples they've had of community collaboration. So I'll do the same. One of my first collaborations was something called Christian Community Services Incorporated in Nashville. It was before I even had a social work degree. I was invited by 2 churches, one Black and one white, in 1997, right after the so-called welfare reform bill was passed, to help women who hadn't been working because they'd been on AFDC to make the transition from work. And they thought they're going to buy this big building and have all these services and raise all this money. And by the time I got there, they hadn't raised much of that money. The building cost too much. And I decided, you know what? We're just going to do a pilot first. We're going to do a family mentoring program and see what the needs of these families are. And so I met with social workers. I met with public housing staff. I met with the mayor's office. I met with, when people gave me recommendations, I met with each family individually to see what they wanted to get out of the program. So like the first 2 months, all I did was talk to people. And then we launched this pilot. Some things worked well, some things didn't work so well. We kept making changes over time. But I'm pleased to say that the organization CCSI is celebrating its 25th anniversary. And when I went to their 20th anniversary 5 years ago, probably 85% of the stuff that I established, they were still doing. So, so hopefully we got some of it right. But spending time talking to people, and one of the things I did for sure is I had 2 or 3 sessions planned out, but I also wanted to make sure that we're open to what people wanted, so what their needs were, what they wanted. And so one of the things that happened once it became more formal after I left, they kind of said, well, if you miss more than 2 classes, you're not going to be eligible for the match savings account. They put a lot of kind of restrictions on it, but I really made everybody part of the process. And I'd like to think we got a good result from that. Similarly, I was part of something called My Seed, Saving for Education, Entrepreneurship, and Down Payment, a child savings account program. And again, we got to know all the staff, all the fundraisers, many of the community residents, then all the other child savings account programs throughout the country that was getting started. Because one of the things that happened is, believe it or not, even though we were giving 500 families $1,000 to save toward their child's education, some people didn't believe it was true. They believed it was a scam. We were having trouble getting people to sign up. And so when we met together as a group, we gave ideas. And one of the groups that had the most success are Harlem Children's Zone, because they had the trust of the community and they were able to say, if your Head Start teacher tells you to do this, you should do it. And they did it. They didn't have they weren't starting something from scratch. So it takes time to build trust. And that's one of the things I learned with My Seed. As Ed mentioned, I was part of the Good Neighborhoods Initiative in Detroit. And so for me, I hadn't been known as being a policy researcher, but I lived in Detroit, and 2 of the neighborhoods near Rosedale Park where I live were Brightmoor and Cody Rouge. And I got a chance to know the residents, and we hired executive directors, and we helped them create bylaws. And I mean, over a period of 10 plus years, really, really deep connections of community. And I'll let Carol and others and Amy talk about this, but just the fact that that long time period to build relationships over time, it's a beautiful thing. And finally, we have something called ELAC, Employment Equity Learning and Action Collaborative. And I can thank Ed for this when he was at the Kellogg Foundation. Many of us here at the School of Social Work were able to bring a lot of the Kellogg grantees together to say, if we wanted to bring equitable employment in the city of Detroit, what sort of things would you like to do? So we met on a monthly basis. We got people a chance to get to know one another. Some of the partners collaborated with one another. We brought experts from the outside to talk, but we also let our members share what they were doing. And over time, I think we built trust and we're able to have some success there. So I'll stop there. Those are some examples of my collaborations. And the next 2 things are going to look really complicated, but they're not. I'm just going to say really quickly. This is a conceptual framework to show kind of why do children turn out as they do, and why does economic circumstances of families make such a difference. And one of the things I show, there's things that are going on in the family. So on the family and individual side, things like parental involvement, things like maternal and paternal stress, material hardship, things like that. But then how much money you have also determines what kind of neighborhood you live in, right? So is it walkable? Are there green spaces? Is there childcare? What are the other people in the community like? What are the school resources like? What are the civic participation like? And because in the US, we have a history of racial injustice, you have to think about what's going on in terms of systemic barriers, and all those things work together to figure out what happens with the child. And actually, there's a better model that I just saw from Urban Institute, and this is their idea of how to increase, I want to say, upward mobility is what they call it. And so they have a 3-part definition. You need to have economic success, but also dignity and belonging, also power and autonomy. Kind of a wave going through is a focus on racial equity. And then they have these five pillars. So rewarding work, high quality education, opportunity-rich and inclusive neighborhoods, healthy environments with access to good health care, and responsive and just governance. And just to make a couple final thoughts, it's only possible to create these kind of communities with upward mobility for all people and opportunity for all if you do it collectively. No one person, no one organization, no one sector can do it alone. And so with that, I'm going to pass it on to our panel to give some examples of how they've worked in community collaborations. And so we have this amazing panel of alumni of our School of Social Work, and I'll say their names and their most known affiliation, but I'm also going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So we have Amy Good, who graduated in 1980, and she was the founder and then retired her whole career working for Alternatives for Girls. And then Carol Goss, who graduated in 1972. She's current founder and president of Warrior Women Against Poverty, which I look forward to learning a lot more about. But she also was former president of the Skillman Foundation. And then last but not least, Charles Tomasulo, who graduated in 1979, and he's a retired executive director of Family Service Agency of Mid-Michigan. So now I'm going to stop talking and give you guys a chance to learn from them. But the first question is just introduce yourself and tell me of one of your early significant community engagement projects, and then maybe end with a more recent example and maybe share how your approach to community engagement and collaboration has evolved or changed over time. So Amy, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Trina. And good morning, everybody. This is really an honor. I'm really pleased to be part of this. I echo what Dean Angel said, that it's really wonderful to be in a virtual room full of social workers. Okay, to be efficient, I'll just move on. So as Trina said, I am recently retired 6 months ago from leading Alternatives for Girls. I was part of starting Alternatives for Girls in 1987 and led the organization for 37 years. Obviously saw it grow and change. Alternatives for Girls, or AFG, serves girls and young women experiencing homelessness and other risks. Even though I'm retired, it's only been 6 months, and I'm going to keep on saying we. I don't know if I'll ever change that habit. So we do that through a number of different, a lot of different programs and services, ranging from a collection of housing supports. We recently, in August, opened an affordable housing, 45-unit affordable housing development in Northwest Detroit. Very close to where Trina and I both live. We have a shelter and a transition to independent living program for girls and young women experiencing homelessness, including those with children in their care. We do street-based outreach, which I'll talk about a little bit more later in a different question. We do all kinds of prevention services, working with girls from kindergarten all the way through high school and beyond, through first couple of years of college. And we have an early childhood education center. We have one in our shelter site, and we're working on building one in the affordable housing building. But our headquarters and everything except the affordable housing project, everything else is in Southwest Detroit. Brief shout out, in case I don't get a chance to say this later, to U of M. Throughout AFG's growth and development, and we have been so fortunate to have had the support of this school of social work, including a number of professors who mentored me and AFG, like Trina. This school can really claim a stake in the organization that AFG was and has become. So leveraging relationships and resources with a partner like this school, and of course, funding partners like the Skillman and Kellogg Foundations, ought not to be overlooked as valuable elements in community engagement and collaboration. So AFG began, I'm checking my timing, in a model that's not just community engagement, but it was truly birthed by the community as a grassroots response to an unacceptable state of affairs. Girls and young women in Southwest Detroit were experiencing homelessness, school dropout, gang exploitation and violence, and involvement in sex work and sex trafficking at an alarming and escalating rate. A group of Southwest Detroit residents, including myself, all volunteers, nearly all of us residents of the Southwest Detroit community, and even those who weren't residents were stakeholders. Some belonged to faith communities, owned businesses, or otherwise worked in the community. This group came together, saw what the need was, collected data in an organized, systematic way, had a community forum in June of 1987, came out of that community forum with some priorities, deciding what needs to be done, and set about trying to find already existing organizations to step up and do that, to provide emergency shelter, to reach out to girls and women who are involved in sex work, to help girls and help families help girls stay in school. We weren't able to find already existing organizations to do that, so we ended up doing it ourselves. We did it just as volunteers. We even opened a shelter and ran it for 5 months without money, and eventually got a grant and were able to hire staff. And since then, we've grown, always in response to changing community needs, our evolving understanding those needs and of what works and what doesn't. So that requires ongoing active engagement with many sectors of the community. And we have always needed to be intentional about continuously checking in with community residents, with partners, with participants and their families, sometimes overlooked, with volunteers and with staff, also sometimes overlooked, in formal ways like strategic planning processes, and less formal and more frequent ways, just one-on-one conversations, focus groups, being in close touch with other community institutions, lots and lots of community institutions. These all inform our work. Youth and peer mentoring and leadership have always been foundational elements of AFG's model. We understand that engaged young people become engaged adults, and engaged adults create thriving communities. Jumping forward 37 years, one of my projects in retirement is involvement as a volunteer in a community effort to support immigrants and their families in both concrete and other ways, given the very difficult and uncertain environment that is today. This project has come together in recent months and is just starting to get traction. This is a unique environment. The political situation and the vulnerability of immigrants is for some an intense call for action. Yet there are factors that pose real risks for open organizing. The group has come together despite this and worked to set up an environment that's as safe as possible for those asking for help, while still spreading the word far and wide about the availability of support, such as groceries, clothing, errands, crisis counseling, legal support, and other help. And needing to mobilize many sectors of the community. For example, many churches and nonprofits are involved. Some are doing so quietly, others more openly. There are stakes involved in this work. The group is rapidly attracting volunteers and is struggling a bit to match resources to needs, very normal growing pains. The big issue in outreach, both to those offering support and those who seek support, is trust. Was, as Trina talked about, which takes time and relationship building. It's been fascinating for me to participate in such a different role, intentionally not as a leader, but as a follower and a learner, respecting the leadership of mostly young people. This is one of those examples of a project where even if one or a group does not feel fully ready to take on a challenge, the time is now. And we have to act, ready or not, without all the answers, without all of our ducks in a row. This project reminds me in so many ways of AFG's early days, when we didn't quite know where we were going or how we were going to get there, but we knew that action was required of all of us in the moment to address real danger and suffering experienced by our neighbors. This project calls upon volunteers to be flexible, patient, sometimes brave. An example of my low rank status is my inability to speak Spanish. And while I'm working on that every day, my ability to contribute is limited by that. I'm committed to playing a minor but active support role. And unless there's a clear need and opportunity to play a larger role, but being mindful of the importance of supporting the community and young adult-led directions of the project.
Thanks
I
so
went
much,
a little
Amy.
over, sorry.
No, that's great. That was perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
Amy. Carol, if you don't mind going.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Trina and Amy, for your really inspiring presentation. I'm Carol Goss. I'm a retired volunteer, but I spent many years working as the CEO of the Skillman Foundation, and I'm currently the founder and president of Warrior Women Against Poverty. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. And I just want to acknowledge Ed Ignatius. So I just have to say, I'm going to talk about the good neighborhoods at the Skillman Foundation, but really Ed Ignatius led that work for us. And I'm so grateful for all the work that he did. He should be doing this presentation, and I would not mind at all if he interrupted me if I get something wrong. But let me just get started with talking about the Good Neighborhoods. It was shortly after I became president in 2004, we began really at the Skillman Foundation looking at the data around how well children were doing in Detroit. And frankly, the data around well-being was not very good. And even though the foundation was making all kinds of grants across the city, education, youth development, human services, it was not having the impact that we felt young people needed. So we did a deeper dive that could tell us more about where children were living and where the programs were that we were funding. And we found that there was not a connection, that there were many organizations we were funding, but they were not in the neighborhoods where the most children were living. And that began to tell us a story about what's happening in with children in Detroit. So we started a focus on looking at the neighborhoods where children lived. Children used to live in the core of the city, and those children had moved to communities on the outer ring in search of better schools, better housing, support for families. All of those made sense. And as we began to look deeper, we realized that we should also be focusing on those neighborhoods, but not in the traditional way where we are just a grant maker and where we make grants, but as what we came to call a change maker. And that we began a partnership with those neighborhoods. And so we got to know the people, the young people, the organizations that were already working in those neighborhoods, long conversations about what are you doing? What do you need? What is important to you? And we took our board, because we had to convince our board to partner too, on field trips out into the neighborhoods. And they got to meet just what we began to call natural helpers, ordinary citizens who were partnering and doing work. And as a result, we identified 6 neighborhoods where there were lots of children and there was great need. Some were doing okay, but could easily tip into not doing so okay. Some needed lots of support, a rebuilding, sort of that they had more extreme poverty and lack of housing. And some who were just really doing well. So we had these 6 neighborhoods and we started having community meetings where we invited anyone interested. And I'm only going to talk about, because this is the piece on collaboration, anyone could come to this meeting. Any nonprofits, parents, young people, business, bankers, anyone could come. But we didn't expect that everyone would come. Churches would come. So we had our first meeting in January, and it was really cold, kind of snowy. It's in Southwest Detroit. Amy, you probably remember that. And we said, well, maybe we'll get 50, 60 people come. Over 200 people came, voiced their concerns, asked questions. We had technical assistance to help us with forming a meeting where we could have community engagement. It was amazing. I was actually, pretty surprised myself. The University of Michigan School of Social Work was there. All of this to help us begin to form a partnership, a strategy, goals that would really make these neighborhoods the best possible place for young people to grow and develop. It was very important to have youth development and to have young people voice. What do they want? What would in the future? And then we had support so that the communities could evaluate themselves and could also learn, were they doing well at all? We had these meetings all over the city. They were amazing, amazing partnerships. And what we knew is that our goal was to change the odds that children could be successful. Not some children always beat the odds, but for every child to have the opportunity and to change those odds. So I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll move on. We were a grant maker, so we had resources, but it was not enough just to make grants. We had to have partners. We had to have technical assistance. We had to really work closely with our providers and with, the nonprofit community. And we said, well, we're going to be giving grants in these 6 communities. So if you want a Skillman Foundation grant, you really have to do your work in these communities because this is where most of the children are. I think it was amazing. I think probably Trina could talk more about outcomes. I certainly learned a lot. 4 of those neighborhoods still have organizations that are going strong, that are providing support in their communities. And I recently had an opportunity to talk with the leaders, and they everything they learned working together in this collaborative way, in a partnership on behalf of young people, has made a difference. Now, let me just quickly talk about Warrior Women Against Poverty. So one of the things I really learned was that children need their parents to be there for them all the time and to be ever present in their lives. And while lots of good things were going on, our most vulnerable children did not have the kind of social networks and support. Their parents didn't have that kind of support. We did, some kind of thinking about, if you open your wallet and you need something, you have resources in your wallet to help you with that. The families that are most vulnerable, they have neither resources nor friends nor family to help them. So in 2015, we started Warrior Women Against Poverty, which is a volunteer movement of Black women to support our most vulnerable women. And we do that in partnership with COTS. So most of these women have been homeless, they have children, they are moving towards self-sufficiency. We have been doing this for 10 years. We have had 3 college graduates. We have children going to college, but the support is through education, mentorship, and providing a social network. It is amazing. It's just an amazing effort. I think I've learned more about myself being a part of that than anything else. So I will stop now. I apologize for going over.
No, you're good. Perfect. Thank you so much, Carol. So many important tidbits you put out. So now we'll hand it over to you, Charles. You're muted. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay. Now? Okay,
Yes,
great.
you're good.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, and very impressed by Amy and Carol. And let me begin by saying a little history. I came to the University of Michigan School of Social Work in 77 and planned to stay in Michigan for about 6 months after I graduated. And that was like 40 years ago. I'm still here, but I did unpack and thought I would stay. So it has been a delight. I retired 5 years ago, and still very busy in the community. And I've learned some interesting things over the years. When I got to Flint and started working as a social worker, Flint, Michigan had the second highest per capita income in the United States. And wasn't that grand. So money was just there, knock on a door, and lo and behold, resources. Well, if anybody has seen the documentary Roger and Me, and that came out in '89, the bottom fell out. But the reality was, prior to that, all of the human service, social work agencies, what in those days we were was called silos. We just did our thing, and independent of everybody else. Collaboration meant that one social worker in the organization would talk to another one. The idea that you were going to go out and have some kind of an interaction with another social service agency was a strange concept. The bottom, as I said, the bottom economically fell out of Flint. So guess what? All of a sudden, we're all looking around and saying, how do we do this? And we began to look, and one of the advantages I think I had, as well as many graduates, is the classes that were research-oriented, data-driven. How do we do this? And so we began to get our staff together and saying, well, what programs? How can we do this? What's the limits, the resources? So we began to focus on areas that no one else was focusing on. And one of the things, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but it may be, maybe not, but it's a graph. I can see that. I can't see it, but anyway, it's a graph that says by 2025, there'll be more people in Michigan 65 and older than under 17. And so that said, older adults may be something that is underserved and will need some services to address. So we began to talk to ourselves about it, and there was obviously some pushback. Older folks, who wants to provide services to them? And the concept that maybe someday they might be older. So that was a hard sell for some, but we eventually all came together on it. So as an agency, we began to look at that, discuss it, research it. And one of the things we realized, we needed to identify other stakeholders in the older adult community who may have some interest or may not. And so, but we began to reach out. And so one of the areas we went to was other community organizations, other United Way agencies. Prior to the financial issues, Family Service Agency was, in today's dollars, was getting in about $1 million from United Way. And so after that, we weren't getting funded to any great degree. So we went out and looked at the healthcare providers always had issues in terms of older adults, geriatric care specialists, clinics, law enforcement. And law enforcement was an interesting one because we would get calls from the Genesee County Sheriff saying, there's some elder abuse, we'd like you to look at it, go over there and see what you can do. Other social service agencies, public health, also were invited to the table. And we were also interested in some elder rights folks, so the legal community, as well as some researchers who might be interested in looking at some data on this. So we began to meet monthly and come up with some plans. And this was very tentative because everybody was nervous you were going to steal my whatever. And so we had to assure everybody that we're all on the same team, even though we represent different organizations. Our goal is to address elder abuse, older adult services. And the reason, again, is because when we look at the demographics are changing. And do we want to be an agency or a group of agencies that begin to address this? And to say it was easy would not be telling you the truth, but we were persistent. So we began to do needs assessment after we got people on board. And we had some focus groups. And one of the big ones who helped us initially with this is the foundations, the Mott Foundation and the Community Foundation, very helpful, and at least giving us some resources to begin the process of looking at all of this. And once we got it going, how do we define or identify or invite other collaborators on this? Well, we had to have a presentation, a goal, and clearly one of the issues is what is our goal, and making that a part of the discussion. And then we mapped out stakeholders. Who, besides our group, should we invite into this? Policymakers, advocates, other community members. And then we had to get the human service professionals involved to some degree, social workers, mental health professionals, government officials, nonprofits. And then we worked directly with the community. We wanted their input in this. We want them to sit at the table with us to say, what are the needs from your point of view? So what did we do? We invited victims and family members and caregivers and health professionals and social service agencies, law enforcement, legal profession, as I said, community organizations, and all to become collaborators in our program. One of the big ones that we had to convince was our friends in state government, Adult Protective Services at the county level. They were somewhat hesitant to join us, but eventually they did. And eventually we got to the point where we had organizations, Family Service took the lead on this, began to develop the management system in order to continue the process. One of the areas that we were looking at was using technology. And the technology, when I started, was an IBM Selectric electric typewriter that had spell check on it. Can you imagine that spell check? Wasn't that wonderful? So we talked to some folks who know a lot of stuff about computers and wrote some proprietary software for us to begin to start tracking older adult areas, older adult needs, older adult involvement in the community, and that was very helpful. And one of the advantages was when we were asking for assistance, grants, what have you, from foundations, we had all this data. And what we found out that the data was much more important than the written piece of the proposal. They looked at that a little bit, but they all were at data asking questions. And so when we showed them this, they were rather impressed and began to become more interested in older adult programs and services and the need. And we kept on saying to them that the demographics are eventually going to catch up, where older adults are going to be an issue, a problem, or a benefit, and we like to look at it as a positive happening in the community. So one of the final pieces to this was putting an evaluation framework on this. How do we do this not only at our agency but other agencies? How do you do this? And in fact, when we were in the midst of the writing of the computer people writing the programs, other agencies were were interested in, well, you're doing this with older adults. We could do this with families. We could do this with children. We can do this with other populations. So it was a real interesting development where everybody was coming and sort of looking at what we did. So, you know, we looked at some of the, and I'm going to, I just looked at the clock, sorry. I can go on. We can look at the objectives and evaluation, assessment, and education. Critical importance to this. And we began to look at, and you may be familiar with this, but it was novel to us. And then defining clear objectives. We used the acronym SMART, if you're familiar with that, which is, you know, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. That was very, very helpful because it helped us focus. And when we began to presented this to foundations and other funding sources, they liked it. It was precise. It was you know, a page as opposed to 10. So that was very helpful for this. Now that was what we did in the years I was there, going from the traditional agency to something a little different. Along that, and just wanted to finish in 30 seconds or so. One of the other things that we decided in terms of older adults was how housing was always an issue. And we decided that how do we provide housing for folks in 60 and up? So somebody suggested we become a CHODO. A CHODO? What's a CHODO? A community housing development organization. So we began to build permanent supportive housing units where not only it was a place, a safe and brand new place for folks to live. It was designed by occupational therapists and others who could make this barrier-free and have all of the needs met. Plus, we would provide services, care, homemaking services, transportation. And when we first opened it up, we were a little nervous about this. Well, was anybody come? And then when we realized we had 200 people on the waiting list, and that was a big step in terms of again addressing the needs of older adults. Now, one last thing. If you might be able to see this, you might be familiar with it. This is terrific. Because if I had this 20 or 30 years ago, I would have stolen. I would really use this and said, "Hey, this is all mine." It's fabulous, and whoever goes to this staff at faculty at School of Social Work, and I keep on looking at this and have it marked up and saying yes, yes, yes. So congratulations. Very helpful, and I'm glad I got a copy of this. So thank you very much for listening to me. It's 11 o'clock, and this has been delightful. And to Hala, thanks you, because she's the one who fixed my technology. As I said, I'm really good at an IBM Selectric electric typewriter. So.
Well, thank you so much, Charles. We appreciate your comments and your reflections. Right now, what we're going to do is I'm going to give a series of popcorn questions, and whoever wants to jump in and say something, you can. If you don't have a comment, you don't have to. The first one is, how do you go about identifying collaborators, and how do you know when you have the right people at the table to influence change and when you may have to go get more people? Anyone who wants to start?
I mean, I've got something to say about that, so I'll do it and I'll be brief. So I had some generic comments, but instead of doing that, because being conscious of time, I just want to mention something that's somewhat unique. It's a subset of alternatives for girls on a smaller scale. It's an example and a different model of community collaboration. It's within alternatives for girls, and that is the community made up of victims and survivors of sex work and sex trafficking. So AFG, just thinking about who are the right people to be at the table. AFG conducts street-based outreach to girls and women who are engaged in sex work, including sex trafficking. And we provide concrete support directly on the street all hours of the day and night. While we'll support participants, that's our word, we don't say clients, we say participants, with no limits as we encounter them on the street, sometimes for months or even years. We also invite them to participate in a range of services on site, including individual and group support, family support, workforce development, crisis counseling, other things. A foundational component to our on-site services is recognizing the power of engaging survivors in delivering services, such that they have opportunities to complete a few different levels of the program, building their leadership and helping skills, and then they get hired as AFG employees, as peer leaders. They lead a range of different groups and projects aimed at stopping sex trafficking, providing mutual support to survivors, and impacting policy on a local and state level regarding treatment of sex trafficking survivors by law enforcement, as well as provision of support services. So when we think about who are the right people at this table to influence change, the most important people are the peer leaders themselves, along with others who are currently engaged in sex work, young girls and women who are at risk of becoming involved in sex work, members of the law enforcement community, policymakers, employers, other workforce development providers, and other stakeholders like family members of those who've been lost to sex trafficking. And when I say lost, it can mean a couple of different things. That all these people want to see and enact change. So in this very passionate and inspiring group of sex work survivors, peer leaders, and their allies, there is the potential to make real community change through direct services, education, and advocacy.
Thank you so much, Amy. Carol or Charles, do you guys want to talk about how you go about identifying collaborators or making sure you have the right people at the table?
So I'm just going to say really quickly that you for the work that's being done to support young people, that you have to have, first of all, young people at the table, and you have to have those members of organizations who demonstrated a commitment to young people and to change, who really believe that young people can learn at the highest level, that they can perform at the highest level, that they can do important jobs and have the skills that can be developed to do that. And we need all partners. So you need public, private, you need churches, you need all kinds of people, but they do have to share that belief about the power of young people. And if they don't think young people can change, even young people that may have gotten into trouble, may have experienced poor outcomes in the past, all of them have those opportunities. So we always reached out for people who believed in the power of young people.
You know what, we always had the view of all are welcome. Anyone who wanted to participate in the process, and we're all, and from our point of view, it was how we learn to think that we know all the answers or understand all of what's going on is not very accurate. Everybody has a story to tell, and inevitably, when new people came, they always taught us something that we never thought about, and until you walk in their shoes, you have no clue on what it is. You think sometimes you do, or but so selecting people, we would say, hey, come in. We certainly want to. We're interested in what you have to say. Please participate. Whatever you don't think you have no good ideas or you can't make a contribution. You really can. Just by being here, you're saying something. But we want to make sure that what we're trying to do and say makes sense to you, who are the people we're trying to assist and help. So that's really very important to get that feedback and provide, and educate us on what's going on in the community and older adult communities and nursing homes and other areas of providing older adult services.
Thank you. My next question was about management systems, but I actually want to take a question that was given from the audience, so you can answer the management system or this very particular question. What tools, like focus group surveys, have you found to be most helpful and involving in hearing voices of the community? So if you want to get community feedback and they don't come to your advisory group meeting or something, what's good ways of getting that community voice?
Well, one we always do is have a survey. How a very simple one, but it gives us a direction. It gives us some sense of where the community is, either individuals or groups. So there's always something that we can get feedback, and we found that having them, after we've met, having them do that away from the meeting it was a much better because they could sit back, think about it, and wouldn't be, biased in terms of, well, I was here, I better say this. We went what they're really feeling, thinking, and what they need. So that's how we've done it. So that survey business is real important for us, and we're very, very attentive to what those folks are saying.
I love focus groups. I really think if you can get focus groups with authentic voices, that it really does help in getting the right feedback and shaping how you can go forward with the collaboration. And so I think surveys are helpful, all of that. But I think for me, focus groups have demonstrated strong results.
I second both what Charles said and what Carol said. Focus groups are something that we use a lot, and we use different configurations. One would be youth focused to make sure that young people feel comfortable speaking. So I'll just add one thing. Again, this is somewhat of a unique thing. Several years ago, we did we participated in a project of counting youth experiencing homelessness. And we engaged and hired youth, some who had experienced homelessness themselves, some not, and implemented a project of street-based one-on-one surveys. Over the course of about a week, they were kind of deployed and just had a lot of one-on-one conversations with youth that they encountered walking. Most of the youth that they encountered weren't homeless, but many of them knew those who were and maybe had experienced homelessness in the past, or their families had, or their relatives had. And so they just walked the neighborhood and approached young people and engaged them in conversations, gave them, $10 or something like that. So sometimes you just, to pull those voices that you're not going to get any other way, just have to be really creative sometimes.
Thank you all. I'm going to read another attendee. This is an anonymous attendee. How do you engage those in power to share that power in a collaborative way? So I don't know if you mean government leaders, but just people in power. How do you get them to share that power in a collaborative way?
Amy?
I love that question.
Me
I
too.
love that question because I talk about power a lot and sharing power. And sometimes, one of the things that I say often, and I always worry a little bit about offending men when I say this, but I'll go for it. That I think there's I think of it as a feminist model of power that people, and men are feminists too, of course, that power in lots of circumstances, power can be shared without diminishing one's own power. Sharing, and sometimes sharing power in certain ways, enhances the collective power. What is the expression? A rising tide lifts all boats. So anyway, sometimes it's that setting an approach up in a way that ties into the person's or the institution's self-interest, or something that they care about a lot. So that's one way. And other ways, sometimes just peer pressure. The other 3 city council members in this region are doing this, and we're all looking to you to step up. So there can be other ways of kind of setting things up so it's in somebody's self-interest, I guess.
So I'm going to say 2 things. One, in the Good Neighborhoods, we had what we called a community grants project, so that residents, people that lived in the 6 neighborhoods, they were reviewing small grant proposals from other organizations and residents. and they had the, you know, ability to make, you know, the final decision. And I'm going to tell you, they were much harder than some of the program people that worked at the Skillman Foundation in evaluating those projects. But they, you know, it's just really uplifting to have that, their voice in that. The second thing is that organizing and community organizing, I mean, that was one of the pieces, one of the classes that when I was in the School of Social Work that I loved. Look, you have power if you come together and organize around a particular strategy and objective, and you bring that to those who supposedly have the power and pressure, and you just, the community, you just lift up the community voice in that way. And I think organizing is something that we have to do, and we have to do more of that so that we create opportunities for shared power.
Well, what we did was a little different, but same direction. We went to all of the senior center directors and would have them over in a regular meeting and let them discuss what their issues were, and we would just sort of listen to what they would say. And what our function was to get them together and to find out that, and we had 15 senior centers in Genesee County, and the power together. They were trying to operate somewhat independently, and especially when it came around voting time, all of the, I'm trying to be nice here, all of the political people who are elected tend to, when it's not close to voting time, hard to get a hold of them. But all of a sudden, 6 months before it's time to vote, they're calling us. So what we were doing is trying to have all the senior center directors organize their senior community to say, invite them over, invite the elected person over to the community center, and begin to engage them. And once those folks who were in power realized that this 80-year-old is not by him or herself, but there's a lot of those folks who vote regularly. And so that was an education for the senior service directors who were interested in some other things, and the older adults who really never had that kind of a sense of organization. So that's how we were trying to do this from the grassroots and saying, hey, look at these organizations have power if they knew how to use it. And what we were doing is trying to facilitate that and show them that despite the strength or the power of these folks, especially if they're elected officials, they may not know much, but they know how to count heads.
Thank you. Ed Ignatius added a comment. So he said, add modeling, walking the talk. Carol collaborated with other foundation CEOs to create a culture of collaboration among the powerful. I don't know if you want to say more about that, Carol. I don't know if you can say it publicly, but are there things you did when you talked to other foundation CEOs that you found to be helpful?
No, I think that you do have to have some power of persuasion yourself, where you really make the case. And foundations do collaborate around common strategies and goals, but you make the case how the goal that you're after is related to the goals they want to achieve as well. And I think that was convincing. You have to have a convincing argument, but they also will come together if they think it's in their best interest too.
One more question from the audience, and please put more questions in the Q&A if you have them. You might want to do this one first, Amy. Are there any tips for doing work in a more underground fashion for the safety of community? So if you have to go underground for safety, are there some tips for doing that?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, so of course I'm thinking about the project supporting immigrants. It's new. I'm not an expert, but some things I've observed are there's kind of a balance of bringing of how to bring people in without exposing everybody to undue risks. So the way the group works is if someone is interested in participating, there's kind of all the work is done. Oh, I want to be somewhat careful. Some of the work is done, I'll just say on Signal. Everybody knows what Signal is, now. So the work is done on Signal, but there's kind of a public thread, if that's the right word. And then once people get involved and get engaged and become a little bit more known, then they can get added to one of the committees. And so there's just, but there's just got to be some assumptions of trust and getting to know people. And in order to do the work, risks have to be taken. Risks cannot be eliminated altogether. But there is a reliance on the network, and who knows who, before bringing people into the direct services on the street work, like this family needs something, here's their address. And for whatever reason, this family does not feel comfortable leaving their home today. That's the kind of information that just can't be put out publicly. So Signal, so anyway, there's a more public thread with public information and education, and there are, the direct service interactions that come when somebody becomes more known. And the other thing is engaging with some of the organizations, the nonprofits on the ground, and the group is looking to engage with those, again, that are already known and trusted by the community. And then a third thing I'll say is just education, including of the volunteers. Like there was a session a week and a half ago that I participated in, and it was presented by attorneys who talked about the risks involved in taking different actions, so that people are very well informed and well aware of, the low risks, the high risks, how to, and being very aware of people's rights, our own rights as volunteers, being in a position to educate families about their rights. So the third thing I would say is just being really strong and educating people and raising awareness. So when people do take risks, they're going into it with their eyes open.
Yeah, I would, part of what we're trying to do is to provide some reason and logic to this in terms of immigration and immigrants. As I pointed out earlier, who's going to take care of all these folks over 65? Traditionally we had a pyramid, older people on the top of the pyramid, and on the base were 18-year-olds. Well, now we're looking at it, it's like this, and it appears it's going to go like this, and so that's going to fall over if it gets. So immigrants historically in this country have been the people who have kept this all together, working, and look at, I look at my grandparents who are immigrants, and they were all pretty successful. So I just keep on, going out in the community and talking about this. It is a little frustrating, but and they have when you ask them about the fear they have, it's based on I'm not sure what. They just heard it. So I wish people were a bit more aware of the benefits that immigrants bring to the United States and Michigan.
Go ahead,
So-
Carol.
Yeah, I just want to say something quickly. So I grew up in the 60s and marched in civil rights sit-ins, protests with great risk and lots of caution from my parents saying, don't end up in jail. But you took those risks because the issue was so important. One of the things that we did as young people, though, was we would meet together and decide who could stand the risk, who could take the risk. And sometimes it's, it's that person that in this case is a citizen who has citizenship, is born in this country, is not going to lose that, but it's going to be out there with everyone else. So I'm not suggesting that anybody go to jail, but I do remember protesting, marching with the welfare mothers for welfare rights. I mean, there are great risks. And I just joined this group because we spend the winter in South Carolina called Liberal Ladies of the Low Country. And we're all kind of older ladies. And we are out there marching and we decide, okay, if the police come, who's the person that's going to go to jail this time?
Wow.
If I can just add one little piece, thanks for that, Carol. And also one of the things that we in this group are very conscious of is the privilege of citizenship and also being white. And it can be, sometimes it can be important. A person who appears white is much less vulnerable driving out in public than someone who's not white, even separate from immigration status or citizenship. So, there's an opportunity to share the power that comes with that privilege.
I'm going to ask a final question, but Madison, if you could put up the final poll question, because it may take a little longer to answer this one. And it's really just a chance to share some example you've learned today about community collaboration. So if you don't mind putting that poll question up, Madison, I'll ask my final question.
So Trina, I didn't put it in as a poll because it was just an open-ended question. So we'll just open that up for people in the chat. If you just want to repeat that, and then folks can answer it in the chat.
Okay, so if someone wants to just share something they learned today about community collaboration, put that in the chat so we can just see what people got out of the session today. And that hopefully would be inspiring for all of us. But my final question, there was something about outcomes and evaluation. If you want to talk about that, you can, but really any final thoughts you have before we close out? How about we start with you, Charles?
Well, without outcomes and without evaluation, I think you lose some of the message. And it's important to have outcomes data and to show in terms of what direction you should be going in. What that feedback does is saying, well, I was going to the left, but really the data says I should be going to the right. So that's the guide you use in terms of getting to the goal. No one, very few of us start off at one setting and go in a straight line. But what tells us which ways we should go is the feedback, is the data. Listening, important, and collecting some data that is measurable and one can evaluate.
Amy, any final thoughts on evaluation or anything else?
Thank you, Trina. Just a couple points from my notes about measuring impact. So it starts with defining the goal and identifying what the group wants to achieve, and include in that process what each individual person wants to achieve. You know, that's part of the conversation, but you end up with what the group settles on, and that has to include asking how will we know we've been successful, and it's important to identify interim goals and measures. We worked really hard at AFG to make sure everybody understood the difference between process goals and outcome or impact goals. And there's a time and a place for each of these, and each can be measured. But you can't have only process goals. You have to have outcome and impact goals. It's important to measure frequently and to bounce the assessments off all the stakeholders to see if you're on the right track. And are these the impacts that matter? Are these the impacts that still matter? And to step back and do a high level review on a regular basis, especially early on, like every quarter, but always starting any review with reminding each other about the goals that were initially defined, and then consider whether they remain the best, the relevant goals.
Thank you. Carol?
So the question is about impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of define it in a lot of ways. I do think you have to have goals and things that you're working for and working towards, and you want to see results, and you need outsiders who are objectively looking at what's happening and giving you feedback. You know, it's such a hard question because it takes a long time to get the kind of sustained results that we're all looking for. And so I do think we have to have some way of actually measuring what's happening, looking at outcomes, and, you know, defining and gathering data. But I think we have to be realistic about expectations, because all of this work takes a long time. So what are the short-term indicators that you're moving in the right direction? How can you define that? How are you collecting that? They're just, I've come to learn that we have to take baby steps to get to the giant steps that we all aspire to do.
Wow. Well, on that note, we're just about at time. I'd like to thank our wonderful panel. So Amy, Carol, and Charles, we appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your experiences in this virtual format. Madison, is there anything you need to close out on, or are we good?
Yep, I'm gonna close things out. I first just want to thank you, Dr. Shanks, as well as Charles, Amy, and Carol for this engaging discussion. This really was a wonderful session. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to everyone for attending the first session of this year's Building Healthy, Strong Communities Conference. We hope to see you at another session over the next couple of days. The second session, titled Entertain Me Well, a new resource for increasing depression treatment in under-resourced and underserved Michigan communities, will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern today. In the next 1 to 2 weeks, those who have met the attendance requirements will receive an email from our continuing education office. Any questions regarding CE should be directed to the continuing education office at ssw.conted@umich.edu. Thank you for joining us today and have a wonderful day.